Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Creative Careers, where we interview folks with arts and arts-related careers from all over the place. And today we are talking with an entertainment reporter. We are talking with Mark London Williams. Welcome,
Hey
Mark.
guys. Hey, thank you very much.
Oh, we're so
Glad to be here.
excited to talk about this. So tell us, first of all, what does an entertainment reporter do? And maybe specifically, what do you do in your entertainment
Well,
reporting?
that is because if people thought about it, they thought, well, are you, I mean, they would think of Ryan Seacrest on the red carpet or something at the Oscars, and I do actually cover the Oscars every year, not on the red carpet. I'm in the press room where I can talk about that later. There's an interview room where they bring the winners back, and if you're lucky, you get to ask them a question. So I do work the Oscars, but I'm not like a red carpet, like, what are you wearing kind of guy. I have mostly interviewed and written about what we call the below the line aspects in Hollywood. And that's sort of old industry jargon for the crafts and crew people, which comes from the days when they actually, I don't know if this really makes sense to some of when they actually had these things called typewriters before we had software, and you would type up a budget and you would type 2 lines across the page. And over these lines where everybody would become famous, actors, directors, producers, and writers. And then below the lines were everybody else, cinematography on down. So the jargon below the line becomes sort of industry slang for crew people. And I've just fell into this, and I can talk about that, but I kind of fell in, not that I don't have a lot of fun, but I sort of fell into it, about 25 years ago, without thinking it would be kind of a part-time way to supplement what I also do, which is I write novels occasionally for young readers, and some of those have been out, and I've been lucky there as well. But to my surprise, the journalism has been my steadiest form of writing work for the last 25 or 30 years of my life. And it wasn't a thing I intended. I thought it would be like a temporary thing I was doing for 1 or 2 years till the books and scripts took off. And it's been the steadiest kind of writing, and probably it's the writing I'm most known for here in LA. If people have heard of me, which they're not necessarily, but if they've heard of me, it's undoubtedly because I've interviewed them before, or they've seen my byline somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about like how you did kind of fall into this and what made it a good fit for you when you first found that this worked.
Well, I had moved down to LA from the Bay Area, where you're chatting to me from, a little south of where you are in the Bay Area. But I'd grown up in the East Bay in the 60s and 70s, which kind of makes me not only a geographical traveler, but a time traveler as well, in a certain sense, given what that period was like in the Bay Area. And I'd gone to Cal, and I came down, lured by the siren song of Hollywood, wanting to be a screenwriter. And I'd been a playwright. I'd been a theater major, and I was with a theater company founded by some Northern California expats, and I was a playwright in residence. And I would have plays done. And to compress the story, so a friend of mine, this is the 90s now, this is like a while ago for some of us, and the video game industry, as huge as it is now, it was just taking off. Because remember, people were just getting PCs in their houses. Not everybody had, and not even all of those were hooked up. And the ones that were hooked up to the early internet, you'd have to dial in with a modem, and everything was much slower. And so this is all getting started, right? It's sort of the event horizon of the internet and gaming. So a friend of mine who'd worked in PCs and was a math major, he'd come to a play reading. I had a play reading with some actors, and a reading, for those of you, it's not a full production. It's just where the actors they don't have to memorize it, and they might do some blocking, some movement, but mostly they'll hold the script so you kind of cast it. There's like a 80-year-old guy, you get an older guy, and if there's a 12-year-old woman, you get a girl actress. You're trying to hear kind of how the voices will sound if it's produced. And in one of these readings, my friend who was working for a video game company, he liked the way I wrote dialogue, and said, I really like the way you write dialogue, and thank you. And we're looking for people now that video games are being taken seriously, which seems kind of funny in retrospect, but they didn't know it would be. He says, we want better. We're having all our computer programmers write dialogue, and it sounds like robots. Danger, Will Robinson. I mean, very stiff dialogue. So we thought, and we can't really afford. He said, we can't afford. Now more famous people want to work in video games, but not them. And I was kind of an unknown playwright, but I had some chops. So he brought me in, and I did some dialogue rewrites on an early version of Alien versus Predator that they had. That they actually wound up not releasing because they lost the licensing, and Fox, before they couldn't get it out in time. That's a separate story. But they paid me to work on this game, and I rewrote all this dialogue at this station where both predators and aliens were besieging these poor people. And it really taught me a certain amount of compression and scene structure. And I was in grad school. I was in grad school here at USC in a writing program, actually, at that time as well. So this is all converse. So I mean, you say yes. The thing is, I hadn't moved down to LA thinking video games, and I hardly even knew, I didn't have any sons yet. I didn't have any sons that would grow up playing video games, and I didn't play them. So, like, I'd kind of heard of them. But you say yes to stuff. So I said, sure, I'll write dialogue. And he brought me in, and I wound up working on and off for a couple of years, revising, mostly dialogue cues for games, and sometimes helping them plot. Um, Excalibur with X/K was another game I helped them with the plotting and the character name and stuff. Right? So I do this for a while, and now I'm in grad school, and I meet a friend who is working for a computer magazine as a part of a job because he had some tech jobs, and nobody else. I mean, and the internet is new enough that's who's writing about the internet, and he's writing about entertainment, and he gets hired at because of that, he gets hired at Variety, which is a big entertainment publication, although now it no longer exists as a daily paper, but online and a weekly magazine. And he's writing about the internet. And because I had written video game scripts, and I also had a job for Amazon when it was an unknown website. Well, we need content, we need book reviews, and we want to seed the site with book reviews to encourage people who come here to write their own reviews. So there was about a year where they hired a bunch of freelancers, and I was one of those. So between these two things, my having written video game scripts and written and worked online when online was new for this new startup called Amazon, there was this assumption that I knew about all this cutting edge technology. So I started to get assignments through my friend, because he said, well, come on over here and write, meet the editors at least. And I had this lunch one day with this editor at Variety, who turns out she was getting ready to leave. She was kind of, but we drove around. She was running on these, and we just chatted. I didn't know if I was making a good impression or not. I get home, she winds up assigning me an article for showbiz coverage. But I even forget I was interviewing, and I would eventually stay at Variety for 2 or 3 years interviewing, not as staff, but as a constantly deployed freelancer, interviewing actors, producers. But what they wanted me for was to start writing about the internet and technology. And I try to talk to people who would speculate. This is before there was a Netflix, remember, and even before DVDs. I mean, this is like the end of the videotape era. So all the speculation about what would happen, like the thing that we're doing. I mean, all this, we thought this kind of stuff would happen, but nobody had fast internet at home, and nobody could really watch movies. But they hired me to talk to these people who would prognosticate. So it gave me this reputation, probably undeserved, that I could write about cutting edge technology in film production. And I've been sort of steadily employed doing versions of that ever since. I've never been out of work even though it's all been freelance, and not that I've gotten wealthy, and it's like it's part of my livelihood. But it's, as I said, it's been the most consistent part. After Variety, I got hired to be the West Coast editor of a magazine that was specifically covering the fusion of showbiz and internet technology. And then, like a lot of things in that first internet bubble, it went bust because a lot of our advertisers went bust circa sort of 99, 2000, 2001. I know these dates kind of mark me as an older guy, but I guess so did the gray whiskers, right? So I can't pretend. But then I wound up another publication. The same friend who'd hired me, he had a colleague. She was starting a new publication that was specifically about below the line crew people, and they'd heard of it. They got a recommendation to call me because again, my deserved or not reputation as a tech writer, I started to interview visual effects people. And I did a kind of a union news column about when strikes would happen. I'd cover labor news. And then through that, I started to become known as a visual effects writer. And some of the other crafts, I would talk to editors, occasionally costume designers, composers. But my focus was mostly visual effects. And then I started to do production design and cinematography. And I wrote steadily for them for years, and with the eddies and flows. But now I'm a columnist. Now I write more about cinematography. Now that's also become more digitally based. And I'm a columnist now for British. I'm an American columnist for this magazine, British Cinematographer. I'm like their one-man Hollywood bureau, and I contribute articles to this website run by the MPAA, the producers organization, called The Credits. And both of these jobs were people. I'm very lucky. These people recommend. These are things like, oh, I'm applying for that. It's like they'd say, hey, we heard your name from so and so. We're looking for a guy in LA. Yeah, you just say, you keep saying yes to stuff as a freelancer. And so I've really learned all this on the job, like how to talk to cinematographers, visual effects, what kind of software they use, RenderMan and Shake and all these software suites. And you talk about visual by workflow and pipeline. And, I would have to learn how to converse with these. Sometimes they'd be Oscar winners I'd be talking to. And so it made me. I did finally know what I was talking about, but by saying yes and getting assigned these situations where I'd have to kind of bone up, and I would learn from the people I was interviewing, I did eventually become adept enough that I'm a reasonably competent interviewer with these people who are kind of at the top of their craft usually. And as I say now, in the last 10 years, I've actually been going to the Oscars as well. And then I sit in the press room and, you're talking to not cinematographers, visual effects supervisors, sound editors. You might wonder, like, well, do you ever try to talk to actors or directors? And I might, but the way it works backstage at the Oscars, everybody has a number. It's kind of like an auction. You're 333, 55, and they'll call your number. And the more famous an Oscar winner is, the more of those hands go up and your odds get reduced. But like what's in a sound mixer, I'm one of these 3 or 4 people usually that will ask them a question. And I figure that's kind of part of my job now as the below the line guy, is to ask questions of these craftspeople, even if no one else is, just to get at, because the Academy also keeps a transcript kind of what for people to refer to later. So I figure kind of like almost as a civic duty, even if it's not going to go in my article, I should get this person on record talking about their craft if none of my colleagues are going to ask them a question.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. But again, this all kind of started with the play reading, and in the 90s, kind of just saying yes to video game writing, and then saying yes to writing about video games and online for trade publications. And I kind of learned, I should say the article part, because I'd been a writer in school. I'd written plays, and I'd worked at school newspapers. I mean, the one disclaimer, and I did toy with the idea of being a journalist growing up, because my parents had met on the staff of their college newspaper. And my dad, although he no longer worked as a journalist when I was born, he took a marketing job. The baby was on the way. But they always would talk about and read journalism. They subscribed to newspapers and out-of-town Sunday papers or magazines with columnists they liked. So I grew up, it's kind of like shop talk. I was never actually a journalism major in college, even though I worked on school papers in high school and I think middle school as well. Back when, probably now you might work on a website, but in those days we actually printed school paper, and I would usually sign up for those classes. And so I wasn't worried I wasn't worried about like how you wrote an article, because that was just kind of like, I'd grown up listening to my parents talk about articles and done a little of that in school. So that part I kind of was able to slip into once I sort of get these gigs, these assignments and I would just keep saying yes and trying to do a good enough job. And the copy was good enough that they would trust me to, interview someone else. Then, well, he can handle it. And so, and in those days, God, I think when I started with Variety, I think I actually had a type on it. I think it was the end of the typewriter era. I would type and actually mail them copy initially, but that stopped pretty soon, and then we switched to email.
That's all super interesting. You covered a lot of the questions that I was moving forward toward. I'd love to hear a little bit about what, especially since I'm finding that, so many folks who have arts related careers wear multiple hats.
Right.
And so in your case, you have your entertainment reporter hat and your novelist hat. I'd love to hear maybe how those two inform each other or how they work together.
That's a great question. The novelist hat, I would say, has actually gotten me more teaching work, probably, because once you publish a book, there's also this assumption, again, undeserved or otherwise, that you can write. At least you can, you know how to get to the end of a book and convince somebody to publish it. And I've had some luck there. So I've actually gotten, the other thing, besides being a journalist, I've probably been most steadily employed as is a teacher of writing. And now, as a college, it was already online. I do a business writing course for adults, but I do creative writing courses for teenagers too. One with an academy in English for Chinese students who are bound to American college, and I do a science fiction class and a film criticism class for them. So, and then the film criticism, I would say, actually, the science fiction probably comes from my published novel writing work. But they thought of me for the film criticism class because I guess that additional employment was because of my life as a film journalist. The way they inform each other, sometimes happily, is like right now, one of my books, I wrote a zombie book 2 or 3 years ago. I guess 3 now again. It's my most as zombie books often can be. It's my most pandemic themed book. It's sort of like Life After, and it's about 2 sort of middle school age protagonists, a boy and a girl in a go-kart, riding across Los Angeles. It's called Max Random. And so one of the cinematographers that I interviewed some years ago, who shot a famous low-budget science horror movie that launched a bunch of careers. I guess I don't have to be coy. He shot Saw, the first Saw, and so that launched a lot of people's careers, including his. And he eventually became a director of other. And I hadn't seen him for a long time, but we had a mutual friend. In fact, this friend, I told you about this publication, Below the Line. Well, she used to be the co-publisher of it, and she became a producer for a while, and now she's a liaison in the digital camera company. And so again, you're covering events. I'm at this annual event called NAB, which has been canceled this year, but NAB in Las Vegas, National Association of Broadcasters, which really, it's not even just about broadcast in the old sense, it's about technical gear for production. And production kind of means everything anyway, because movies are on, I mean, TV's not even, TV's on the computer, movies are on the, so what do we mean by broadcast? We mean content. And so it's a show about content and tools. So I'm up there a couple of years ago, and this friend who I used to write for is having this dinner for cinematographers, which I get invited to that because I'm going to put this dinner in my column, my cinematography column. I write for British Cinematographer. So, you know, so I'm there chatting to people. And so here's this guy from Saw who I hadn't seen, and he were catching up, and we wind up sitting next to each other, and he's directing stuff, and he's looking for books, he's looking for kid stuff. And so you can't, like in your phone call, you can't say, well, it's nice talking to you, by the way, will you read my script, right? You can't do that. But this is totally organic. We're at dinner. There's no article contingent on it. I said, well, you know, I can send you this, and our mutual friend had optioned it. So I sent it to him, and he and his writing partner, they loved the book, and they optioned it. And they're actually, I just got an email from them over the weekend, in spite of the shutdown, they're finishing the pilot script, and they're going to send it to me. And then once they can start to take meetings, they're going to see. And who knows, doesn't mean it's going to be a series, but it is optioned, and there is a pilot script, and they're going to take meetings, and it might be a series. And so that was unexpected. You know, you can't kind of force that stuff, and you'll stop getting assigned. You will stop getting trusted to talk to these people if you're foisting your. See, that's the other thing. People go, you have this entree, and you do have this entree, but you have to be judicious in how you use people's time. You know, especially if they're talking about their new film or their new show.
Absolutely. That's really fascinating. As we kind of wrap things up here, this is
Mhm.
obviously going out at a time when students are stuck at home for the most part. They, you know, nobody's going out to movies or to stuff like that. But if this was
Right.
something that somebody was interested in pursuing, maybe more intentionally, what
Right.
what would you suggest that they do from their homes today that could help them move toward improving these skills?
Yeah, you just practice writing about aspects of pop culture, or I mean, I've talked about movies and TV, but people watching, you may. And I actually I had a year or two where I was reviewing comics. I love comics as well, and I had a column at a science fiction website with another friend where we reviewed graphic novels, and they would send us a bunch of stuff. So I would, and not that we got paid a ton, but we loved comics, and it gave us a chance to write. So I would say. Think about what you love, what you'd love to write about, and start writing. Whether you do a blog or not, or a friend's blog, or on Medium, you know, you can always get reviews published on Medium, and try and working on the brand, as they say of yourself. Review movies, review video games. I know people do that. People are watching this on YouTube, but you can vlog. It doesn't have to just be written, but you still need a structure. I mean, you have to kind of understand the beginning, middle, and end of what you want to say, even if you're speaking it and not writing it. Which is where articles have helped me, I think, even be hopefully a better public speaker when I go, because I have to think of what I'm starting and where I want to end. And you always got to kind of have a structure that hopefully you can intuit. But it's the practice, really. And the thing is, I've been lucky enough, I've had enough article work that I'm constantly forced to practice to meet my deadlines. And that's really it. You just develop an eye or an ear for copy. And now the trick now, though, is getting paid for it, right? Because the models were, I mean, word rate's not even relative, but I actually would get paid more per word on a literal basis, circa like 2000, 2001, in the early days of the internet, than I do now, even though I can still get a reasonable word rate compared to what rates are, but they've really collapsed. So it's much harder kind of to do that. And the old, you used to be able to be on staff somewhere as like a film critic, you know, and that seems kind of impossible. Yet there's still publications, especially with video games and that technology, that are looking for good writers. So distinguish yourself in some way. If you know how to articulate what it is that fans want when they come to, if you're doing reviews, or if you're taking creators, like, you know, if you want to talk to voice actors to do video games, or people who render them. I mean, just talking about that as an example. Find someone who's interesting and just, talk to them and write it up and give yourself, like a deadline. See what you can do in 900 words or 700 words, kind of a strict. That's the other trick, is how much can you, because you have to learn how to compress, boil down. Like I'm talking to someone, I got an interview with a cinematographer when we're done, about an hour from now. And I'll be talking half hour, 45 minutes. It's going to be a 900 word article, at most. And so I have to boil the essence of what he or she is saying to me. So all that comes from practice, and just figure out a way to get practice. Getting paid for it's going to be harder, but people also have the options to kind of monetize these things themselves as well, which didn't exist as easily when I was starting out. So, but you just got to kind of jump in and do it. I mean, to me, it was just by not saying no, right? I would get dragooned. Okay, I'll do it. So you got to do that for yourself.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all this information with us today.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me aboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And viewers, tune in again tomorrow at 1 p.m. for more Let's Be Creative arts content. We will see you then.
Good. All right.